Mira had lived her whole life in a quiet village surrounded by green fields, narrow, dusty paths, and the soft sounds of animals moving around in the early mornings. The place was peaceful, but for Mira, it also held a kind of loneliness she never spoke about. From childhood, she grew up hearing people say that a girl's life was complete only when she married and built a family. Other girls her age dreamt of wedding clothes and celebrations, but Mira never let herself dream too loudly. She always felt that dreams were like bubbles, beautiful, but easy to break. She was the kind of girl people often passed by without noticing. Not because she lacked anything important, but because she was quiet. She moved gently, spoke softly, and never tried to put herself in front of others. Many villagers called her a simple girl, and although they did not mean anything cruel, those words slowly became part of how she saw herself. Her days were filled with chores and small routines. Mira woke before sunrise, swept the front yard, fed the chickens, helped her mother cook, and prepared water for the animals. After that, she spent hours in the fields beside her father, planting, cutting, or carrying baskets of vegetables. She knew every corner of their land, the shady tree where birds liked to sit, the small ditch where rainwater gathered, the soft patch of soil that always grew flowers, even in dry months. Although she worked hard, she rarely complained. She believed that as long as she kept doing her tasks, things would eventually get better. But as the years passed, she watched other girls her age leave the village one by one, dressed in bright wedding clothes, laughing as they stepped onto decorated carts or cars. Some of them had grown up with Mira, playing simple childhood games, sharing snacks, or whispering secrets at night during festivals. Now those same girls returned only occasionally to visit their parents, holding babies on their hips or wearing gold jewelry around their necks. Each time this happened, Mira smiled politely and congratulated them. But deep inside, a soft ache settled in her chest. She wondered why no one ever looked at her the way those husbands looked at their wives. Was she really so easy to ignore? The village matchmaker visited their home a few times, but the conversations always ended the same way. The matchmaker would tilt her head, study Mira for a long moment, and then say something like, "She is a good girl, but the boy's family is looking for someone more lively, or she is skilled, but they prefer someone more sociable." Mira heard these comments through thin walls or half-open doors, and each time she felt herself shrink a little more. Her parents tried to comfort her. Her mother often told her, maybe the right person has not come yet. Her father would pat her head gently, saying good things take time. But even they could not hide their worry. In their village, a girl remaining unmarried after a certain age made people whisper, and people did whisper. Mira could feel it in the way some neighbors spoke to her too kindly, with a pity that stung more than harsh words ever could. Still, Mira carried on with her life. She found peace in small things: the warm smell of freshly baked bread, the soft feel of cotton cloth on laundry day, the cool wind that blew across the fields in the late afternoon. She loved listening to the sound of rain hitting the roof and watching water drip from the leaves of banana trees. She loved caring for animals, especially the small calf that always nudged her hand for attention. These simple joys kept her heart alive even when loneliness tried to settle inside. On days when she felt especially unseen, Mira would walk to the far end of the fields, where a small hill stood. From the top, she could see the whole village, tiny houses with clay roofs, people moving like little dots, smoke rising from kitchens. She liked standing there because it made her feel larger, as if she finally occupied some space in the world. She would stay until the sky slowly shifted from bright blue to soft orange, and only then return home. But even with these peaceful moments, the truth remained: Mira's life was moving forward. While her heart stood still, whenever there was a festival or gathering in the village, Mira attended with her family, but she often felt like a shadow in the crowd. Other girls laughed loudly, danced freely, or chatted in groups. Mira stayed close to her mother, carrying plates or helping serve food. A few boys glanced at her, but not with interest, only with the same casual look they gave trees or stones. Things that had always been there. Sometimes older women approached her with polite smiles. They would say, "You are such a good girl. Why hasn't anyone chosen you yet?" Mira never answered. She only lowered her eyes, pretending she had not heard the question. Her heart would tighten each time, as if someone had placed a stone inside it. She did not hate them for saying such things. She simply wished she could disappear when they asked. One afternoon, while Mira was washing clothes near the well, she overheard two women talking under a tree. They didn't see her, and maybe they wouldn't have stopped even if they had. "It's a shame," one woman said. "She's not a bad girl, but she's just not special." The other woman sighed. "Yes, boys today want someone modern. Someone who stands out. Mira is too quiet. She blends into everything." Myra froze, her hands still in the water. The words felt like tiny needles. She tried to remind herself that they were just talking, that their opinions did not define her. But part of her believed them. Part of her had always believed them. That night, she lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling while moonlight slipped through the window. She wondered if being special was something a person could learn or change. Was she supposed to act louder, dress differently, speak more confidently? She didn't know. All she knew was that she felt tired of trying to be enough for a world that barely turned its head toward her. Still, Euro was not hopeless. She had a quiet strength inside her, a steady kind of patience that kept her moving even when her heart felt heavy. Each morning she woke up and completed her tasks, even on days when her chest felt tight or her throat felt warm with unshed tears. She knew how to keep going, even when she didn't know what she was moving toward. There were moments, however, when she allowed herself to imagine a different life. She pictured someone standing beside her in the fields, helping her carry baskets, laughing with her at small mistakes, listening to her thoughts with real interest. She imagined someone who did not expect her to change, someone who saw her quietness not as a flaw but as part of her charm, someone who chose her simply because he wanted to, not because his family insisted or because she was the only option available. But each time the fantasy grew too warm, Mira pushed it away. Dreams were dangerous for someone like her. They opened doors that reality quickly closed, yet even without realizing it, life was quietly preparing to change. Something unexpected waited just beyond the fields, beyond the horizon she watched each evening. Someone was going to walk into her quiet world, someone who would look at her differently, someone who would break the pattern of people passing her by. But for now, Mira did not know any of this. All she knew was the gentle rhythm of her life, the familiar loneliness, and the small hope buried deep inside her heart. Hope that maybe, someday, someone would finally see her. Mira's life continued in its calm rhythm as the seasons changed. The fields turned golden, then brown, then fresh green again. Every day felt similar, but Mira never complained. She had grown used to a life that asked her to give more than it ever gave back. She woke early, worked hard, and returned home quietly as the evening softened the village. Although Myra tried to fill her days with simple tasks, her heart still carried a small heaviness. It wasn't loud or painful, just a quiet ache like something missing, something she couldn't name. She told herself she should be grateful. She had a family who cared for her, a home that kept her safe, and work that kept her busy. But sometimes gratitude and loneliness lived side by side inside her, and she didn't know how to separate them. One afternoon, her mother asked her to go to the nearby city to buy a few household items they couldn't find in the village. Mira didn't visit the city often, but she liked the change. The city was full of color and noise, different from the slow pace she was used to. It made her feel like she was stepping into a different world, even if only for a short time. She tied her scarf neatly, put the small shopping list in her bag, and walked to the bus stop. The bus was old, shaking gently as it moved along the rough road. Mira sat by the window, watching fields and trees pass by in long stretches of green. For a moment, she imagined herself traveling even farther to a place where no one knew her, where she could start fresh, without the weight of people's expectations. But as always, she let the thought fade, turning to the reality in front of her. The city was busy, with people moving quickly, shopkeepers calling out, vendors selling tiny snacks on carts. Myra walked carefully, holding her bag close, trying not to get lost in the crowd. She managed to buy everything on her list, and had just stepped out of a small stationery shop when she accidentally bumped into someone. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, stepping back. "It's all right," the young man replied kindly. He looked different from the villagers. His clothes were simple, but neat, and he held a notebook with pages full of handwriting. A small camera hung from his shoulder. He seemed surprised for a moment, then smiled politely before moving aside to let her pass. Mira didn't give it much thought. People bumped into each other all the time in the city. She continued with her shopping and returned to the village by evening, tired but content that she had finished her tasks. She did not know that this small moment in the city would become the first thread of something that would later change her life. A week later, a visitor arrived in the village. Visitors were uncommon, so people noticed immediately. The same young man Mira had bumped into stepped out of a vehicle, holding the same notebook and camera. He spoke with the village head, explaining that he was an anthropology student studying rural traditions, daily life, and cultural stories. His name was Evan. The villagers welcomed him warmly because they liked visitors who appreciated their culture, and Evan did. He listened carefully, asked polite questions, and smiled often. He did not act superior or distant like some city people. He blended in easily. Walking through the village with respect and genuine curiosity, Mira did not expect him to remember her. But one afternoon, when she was returning from the fields carrying a basket of vegetables, she saw him walking toward her. "Excuse me," he said with a friendly tone. "Aren't you the girl from the stationery shop? I think we bumped into each other." Mira blinked, surprised. She nodded shyly. "Yes, that was me." "I thought so," he said. "Sorry again for that. Crowded places make everyone clumsy, I guess." His easy manner made her smile a little, though she looked down quickly, not wanting to seem bold. "If you don't mind," he continued, "I'm trying to learn more about the farming here. Would it be all right if I talked to you sometime? Only if you're comfortable?" No one had ever asked her something like that. People rarely asked for her opinion, let alone her knowledge. For a moment, Mira didn't know what to say. "Yes, I can help," she responded quietly. "Great," he said, smiling warmly. "I would appreciate it." Over the next few days, Evan visited different families and fields, taking photos of tools, crops, and daily routines. When he spoke to Mira, he did so with care and patience. He asked her simple questions at first: how long she had been farming, what crops grew best in different seasons, what the soil felt like before rain. Mira answered slowly, unsure at first, but gradually she felt more at ease. He listened to her with full attention, nodding thoughtfully at her explanations. One afternoon, he asked, "How do you know the right moment to plant seeds? It seems very precise." Mira thought for a moment, then pointed to the sky. "The clouds tell us, not always, but most of the time. My father taught me. And the wind. It changes before the weather changes." "That's amazing," Evan said sincerely. "You have a way of understanding nature that I've only read about." Mira felt a warmth inside her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever said her knowledge was amazing. As the days passed, they spoke more. Mira learned that Evan had traveled to many places for his studies. He liked learning about different communities and their traditions. He told her stories about small towns he had visited, the mountains he had climbed during research trips, and the interesting people he had met. Mira listened quietly, fascinated by the world he described, a world wider than she had ever imagined. But what surprised her most was that Evan seemed genuinely interested in her, not just in her work or the village traditions, but in her thoughts, her routines, and her experiences. "Do you ever feel tired of the same routine?" he asked one day. Mira shrugged gently. "It's all I know." "Still," he said softly, "you make it look peaceful." His words stayed in her mind long after he left that day. For Mira, Evan's presence felt different from anything she had known. He didn't treat her as invisible or unimportant. He didn't look past her. He looked at her when she spoke. He waited for her words, asked questions not to fill silence but because he cared about the answers. Yet even with this growing comfort, Mira kept her feelings guarded. She reminded herself that he was a visitor, someone from the outside world. People like him came and left. They didn't stay. She didn't want to build hopes that would later hurt her. Her family noticed the change, though. They saw the way. She returned home with a softer expression, the way she seemed more thoughtful. But they didn't say much. They didn't want to push her into another worry. The village women, however, did notice Evan's attention. They often whispered among themselves. He talks to Mira a lot. He asks her about the fields. He seems comfortable with her. Mira heard some of the whispers but tried to ignore them. She knew how quickly people created stories from nothing. She didn't want to misunderstand kindness as something more. She didn't want to embarrass herself by thinking too much. Still, each time she saw Evan walking through the fields, her heart felt a little lighter. Each time he smiled at her, something inside her stirred gently, like a soft breeze touching a still pond. But even then, she kept reminding herself, kindness was not the same as love. She wasn't someone people chose easily, yet Evan returned again and again. Always with the same soft patience, always ready to listen to her quiet voice. And slowly, without meaning to, Mira began to wonder if this gentle, thoughtful human might be different from the others who had passed her by. Maybe, just maybe, he saw something in her that everyone else had overlooked. Mira did not realize how much her life had begun to change until one morning when she woke up and felt something new inside her, something light, something almost warm. It was not happiness exactly, and not excitement either. It was a strange feeling she could not name, but she knew where it had come from. It had come from the presence of a human who had quietly walked into her world and somehow made it feel less lonely. Evan continued visiting the village every few days for his research, but over time it became clear to anyone who watched him that he visited not only for his work. Whenever he arrived, his eyes searched for Myra almost naturally, as if his day felt incomplete until he saw her. And Mira, even when she pretended not to look for him, always knew when he was nearby. She could hear his steps before she saw him, and her heart reacted in a gentle way she wasn't used to. Their conversations grew deeper as the days passed. At first, they talked only about farming and traditions, but soon, Evan began asking her questions that no one had ever cared to ask. "What do you dream about, Mira?" he asked one late afternoon as they walked slowly beside the fields. Mira paused, unsure how to answer. No one had ever asked her about her dreams. People only asked her about work, chores, and responsibilities. "I don't know," she said softly. "I never thought about my own dreams much." "You must have something," he said gently. "Something you wish for, even if it's small." Mira looked at the distant hills, her voice quiet. "I wish for a life where I feel seen, where I am not always in the background." Evan smiled, not with amusement, but with understanding, as if he knew exactly what she meant. "Everyone deserves that," he said. His words stayed in Mira's heart long after he went home that day. Slowly, their meetings became part of her routine. She found herself waiting for them even when she told herself not to. She would finish her chores a little faster, braid her hair a little neater, or wear a cleaner scarf on the days she thought he might come. She never said it aloud, but she felt it inside, a soft desire to be looked at the way he looked at the world, with interest, curiosity, and gentle respect. One morning, while Mira was preparing vegetables beside her house, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw Evan smiling at her with a notebook in hand. "Working early as always," he said. Mira smiled shyly. "There is always something to do." "Can I sit?" he asked, pointing to a wooden crate near her. "Of course," she said. They talked for a long time, far longer than necessary for his research. He asked about her childhood, her favorite foods, the places she liked to visit in the village. Mira found herself answering openly, feeling more comfortable with him than she had ever felt with anyone else. She never had many friends, and even those she had were not people she shared her deeper thoughts with. But with Evan, speaking felt easy, natural, almost freeing, and he really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't dismiss. His eyes stayed soft, and his expressions told her that he truly valued everything she said. It was the first time in her life she felt that her voice mattered. Over the next weeks, people in the village began to notice their growing connection. Some women smiled knowingly. Some whispered among themselves about how unusual it was for a visitor from the city to spend so much time with someone as quiet and understated as Mira, but Evan never seemed bothered by their whispers. He continued walking with Myra through the narrow lanes, visiting her fields, helping her carry baskets sometimes, and asking her stories about traditions that were often forgotten. One day, when they were sitting under the old mango tree near the fields, he asked her a question that made her heart tremble. "Do you know why I talk to you so much, Myra?" She looked down at her hands, uncertain. "Because of your project?" He shook his head. "No, my project is just an excuse now. I talk to you because I feel peaceful when I'm around you. You have a calmness that's rare." Myra's breath caught for a moment. No one had ever said something like that to her. Many had told her she was quiet, but they said it as if it were a flaw. Evan said it like it was a gift. There was a soft silence between them, the kind that felt comfortable. Birds chirped above them, and a warm breeze moved through the trees. Myra wanted to believe his words, but her old fears held her back. She didn't want to misread kindness as affection, but "I'm not interesting," she said softly. "Most people don't even notice me." Evan smiled slowly, shaking his head. "That's because most people don't look properly. They see only what's loud and bright. But quiet things can be beautiful too." Myra felt her throat tighten slightly, touched by the sincerity in his voice. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. As their days together continued, Myra felt herself changing. She spoke a little more. She smiled a little more. She carried herself with a soft confidence she never had before. Evan's presence didn't fix everything, but it made her feel seen, something she had wanted for so long, and slowly. Without realizing it, Myra began to look forward to every moment with him. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Evan walked beside her on the narrow, dusty path leading to her house. He placed his hands behind his back, walking thoughtfully. "I'm going back to the city for a few days," he said. "I need to submit some reports and meet my professor." Myra nodded, trying to hide the sudden worry in her chest. She didn't want him to leave, but she knew that was selfish to say. He had a life outside the village, unlike her. "When will you come back?" she asked softly. "In a week," he replied. "I promise." Promises were not things Myra received often, so hearing him say it made her heart warm. She nodded again, looking at the ground so he wouldn't see the small sadness in her expression. He paused for a moment, as if wanting to say more, but then smiled gently. "Take care, Myra." "You too," she said quietly. After he left, the village felt different to her. It wasn't the same silence she had known all her life. It was a new silence, one filled with longing, with questions, with a tiny fear that maybe he would forget her once he returned to his world. A week passed slowly. Myra tried to keep busy with chores, but her thoughts drifted to Evan constantly. She wondered if he was eating well, if he was safe, if he remembered his promise. When the 7th day arrived and she saw him walking through the village gates again, her heart felt like it had expanded inside her chest. He waved at her from afar, smiling widely, and Myra felt something burst quietly inside her, a realization she had never expected. Someone had returned for her. Someone had chosen to come back. Someone had missed her presence. Even if he hadn't said it aloud, for the first time in her life, Myra wondered if she was truly invisible, or if she had just been waiting for the right person to see her. And maybe, just maybe, Evan was that person. The days after Evan returned to the village felt brighter for Myra, even though she tried her best not to show it too openly. She didn't want anyone to think she depended on him. She certainly didn't want to give the villagers something to gossip about. But inside her heart, she knew something had changed. She had missed him deeply during the week he was gone, and seeing him again felt like sunlight breaking through a long, cloudy sky. Evan also seemed happy to be back. He greeted everyone politely, but Myra noticed something she had not seen before. His eyes lingered a little longer on her face, and his smile softened whenever he looked in her direction. She tried to ignore the warm feeling that rose inside her whenever he did that. Over the next few weeks, their connection continued to grow quietly. They met almost every day, sometimes by chance, sometimes because Evan purposely walked in the direction of her house or the fields she worked in. He brought new stories from the city, and Myra listened with quiet interest. She shared small pieces of her life too, slowly becoming more open with him. But even as their closeness grew, Mira never once allowed herself to imagine anything more than friendship. She reminded herself constantly that he was a visitor. One day he would finish his research and return to the city. She did not want her heart to break when that day arrived. Still, she could not stop the soft hope that grew inside her like an unnoticed seed. One afternoon, the village prepared for the annual harvest celebration. It was one of the biggest events of the year, filled with music, dancing, colorful decorations, and long tables of food. Families worked together to prepare dishes. Children ran around with excitement, and everyone dressed in their best clothes. Mira's mother insisted she wear a bright new scarf and a neatly ironed dress. Mira tried to resist at first, saying she would just help in the kitchen. But her mother shook her head firmly. "You work every day," she said gently. "You should also enjoy the celebration. For once, dress up. Look beautiful for yourself." Her mother's words made Mira smile, even though she didn't really believe she could stand out among the other girls. Still, she followed her mother's request and got ready. When she looked at her reflection in the tiny mirror, she felt a little shy. The scarf suited her, and the dress made her look softer, more graceful. She wondered, just for a moment, if Evan would notice, as the celebration began. The village square filled with laughter and cheerful music. Lanterns hung from ropes, swaying gently in the wind. Families gathered under decorated tents, and children chased each other around. Mira walked quietly along the edges of the crowd, helping serve food and greeting familiar faces. She wasn't someone who felt comfortable in large gatherings. Being surrounded by so many people made her feel small and invisible again. But she reminded herself to keep her smile gentle and steady. A group of villagers, mostly older women, began whispering as Mira passed by. She didn't pay attention at first, but then she heard a few words clearly. "Still unmarried. Poor thing. She's a good girl, but no one ever chooses her. It's too late for her now." Myra's hands tightened around the tray she was carrying, but she kept her head down and kept walking. She had heard similar comments before, but hearing them during the celebration, when she had tried so hard to feel hopeful, made her heart feel heavy. She tried to ignore the sting in her chest. The words followed her like a shadow. A little later, a group of younger women joined in the gossip. Mira didn't mean to listen, but their voices drifted toward her anyway. "Do you think that visitor likes her?" One of them asked with a small laugh. "He talks to her because she helps him with farming questions." Another replied, "That's all. Why would someone from the city choose her?" "She's too quiet," another added. "Boys like girls who are lively and modern, not someone like her." Mira felt her throat tighten. She knew she shouldn't listen, but she couldn't help it. Every word felt like tiny stones being placed on her heart. She realized she should walk away, but her feet seemed rooted to the ground. Then she heard the last whisper, soft but sharp enough to cut. "She's silly if she thinks someone like him will ever look at her." Myra's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hold back. She turned quickly, walking away before anyone could see her face. The music behind her continued cheerfully, but all she heard was the echo of those hurtful words. She went behind the storage shed, where no one usually went during the celebrations. The faint sounds of laughter and drums reached her ears, but she felt completely separate from all of it. She wiped her cheeks, trying hard not to cry too loudly. She had spent years hearing comments like that, yet somehow this time the pain felt sharper. Maybe it was because she had finally allowed herself to hope even, if only a little, and now it felt like that hope was falling apart as she sat alone. Hugging her knees to her chest, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Before she could wipe her tears properly, Evan appeared around the corner. "There you are," he said softly. "I've been looking for you. Everyone is celebrating, but you disappeared." His voice trailed off when he saw her tearful face. "Mira," he asked gently, "what happened?" She quickly turned her face away, embarrassed. "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're not fine," he said, stepping slowly closer. "Please tell me." She shook her head, but tears continued to fall silently. She didn't want him to see her like this. She didn't want to seem weak, but the dam inside her had already cracked, and her emotions were pouring out faster than she could stop them. Evan sat down beside her, leaving a respectful space, but close enough for her to feel his concern. "Did someone say something to hurt you?" he asked quietly. Mira remained silent for a moment. She didn't want to repeat the cruel words she had heard, but she also didn't want to lie to him. Finally, she whispered, "People talk. It doesn't matter. It matters if it hurts you," Evan said. Something about his gentle tone made Mira finally break. She had kept her pain inside for so many years, years of being overlooked, ignored, and quietly judged. And now, with Evan sitting beside her, she felt all of it rising to the surface at once. She looked at him with watery eyes, her voice trembling. "Everyone keeps saying I'm not someone anyone would choose. They always have. No one ever picks me. No one ever sees me." Evan's face softened, concern filling his eyes. "That's not true," he said firmly. "You're but Myra, overwhelmed and vulnerable." Cut him off with words she didn't plan. Words that came from somewhere deep inside. Words filled with years of quiet pain and a sudden burst of desperation. She looked directly into his eyes and asked, almost in a whisper, "Will you be my husband?" The moment those words left her lips, Myra froze. She couldn't believe she had said them. Her face burned with embarrassment, and she quickly looked away, wishing she could gather the words back inside her mouth. She hadn't meant to ask him like that. She didn't even know if she meant to ask at all. It had just slipped out too quickly, too honestly, and too painfully. Evan sat silent for a long moment. Mira felt her heart pounding so loudly she thought he could hear it. She was sure she had ruined everything. She told herself he would now pull away, avoid her, or think she was foolish. But then Evan took a slow breath. "Mira," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion she couldn't interpret. She waited, terrified, holding her breath. He didn't laugh. He didn't show pity. He didn't step away. Instead, he spoke with a calm sincerity that made her heart tremble even more. "Mira, I care about you deeply," he said. "More than you think, but I don't want you to ask something so important because you feel hurt or pressured by what others say." She raised her eyes to him, startled. "I want you to choose me only if you truly want me," he continued softly. "Not because the world has made you feel small." Her breath shook, and tears slipped down her cheeks again. But this time, they were different, gentler, quieter, filled with possibility for the first time. Mira realized something she had never dared to believe. Evan hadn't been spending time with her out of duty or kindness. He had been choosing her. All along. The moment Mira spoke those unexpected words, the world around her seemed to freeze. Her voice had come out shaky, filled with fear and hope at the same time. Even she could not fully understand how such bold words came from her. For so many years, she had lived quietly, speaking only when necessary, hiding her feelings, and believing she could never ask anyone for anything. Yet that night, under the soft lights of the harvest celebration, after all the teasing and the loneliness, the words escaped her heart before she could stop them. Evan stood in front of her, surprised and silent for a long moment. The sound of music and laughter from the celebration drifted faintly through the air, but neither of them paid attention. Mira lowered her eyes, embarrassed by her own question. She felt her cheeks warm and her hands tremble. She wanted to apologize, to tell him she did not mean it, that it came out only because she was hurting. But before she could say anything, Evan gently placed his hand near hers, not touching, only showing he was there. "Mira," he said softly, "look at me." She slowly lifted her eyes. She was scared of what she might see: rejection, confusion, maybe even pity. But instead, his eyes held something warm and careful. It was not judgment. It was concern, gentle and honest. Seeing that Mira felt a small relief, yet her heart still raced, he told her he had been thinking about her for a very long time. He explained that every moment they had talked, every walk through the village, every story she had shared had made him admire her more. He admitted he had hoped she would see his feelings, but he never wanted to push her or make her uncomfortable. He respected her culture, and respected the quiet pride she carried within her. When Mira heard that, her eyes widened. It felt almost impossible that someone like him, a kind and thoughtful man from a different world, could truly feel something for her. All her life she had heard she was not enough. Not pretty enough, not talkative enough, not lively enough. She had learned to believe those words, slowly letting them sink into her heart until they became her truth. She whispered, "But no one ever chose me." Evan shook his head gently. "That doesn't mean you are not worthy. It only means the right person had not come yet." These simple words touched her deeply. She felt tears gather again, but this time they were not from hurt. They came from the soft light of hope that Evan had placed inside her. Still, she wondered if he was only trying to comfort, or because he felt sorry for her. He must have sensed her doubt because he spoke again. "Mira, I care for you, truly. But I want you to choose me because you want to. Not because you feel lonely or pressured by others. I want you to choose from your heart." Mira felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, surprise, confusion, and a deep, quiet joy. She was used to people telling her what she should do. She was used to choices being made for her. No one had ever told her she had the right to choose for herself. And now, Evan was giving her that chance. They spent the rest of the evening talking softly away from the crowd. Mira shared stories she had never told anyone, the fears she had kept hidden, the dreams she never spoke about, the small pieces of her heart she always locked away. Evan listened with care, asking gentle questions, making sure she felt understood. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone truly saw her not just as a girl from a small village. Not as someone overlooked, but as a person with a voice, a mind, and a heart worth knowing. When the celebration ended, Evan walked her home. The night was cool, and the stars shone brightly over the fields. Mira felt calm, even though her life had suddenly taken a new and unexpected turn. At her door, Evan told her he would return the next morning. He wanted to talk again, slowly and respectfully, giving her time to think about everything. That night, Mira did not sleep much. She sat by the small window in her room, looking out at the moonlit fields. She replayed every moment in her mind: his gentle words, his sincere eyes, the way he had not laughed at her question nor walked away. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she had been wrong about herself all these years. Maybe she was not someone to be ignored. Maybe she had simply never met someone who saw her with kindness and truth. Morning came softly, carrying the scent of fresh air and dew. Mira stepped outside, feeling strangely lighter. Evan arrived with a quiet smile, holding a notebook and a bag of fruit for her family. He always carried small gestures of respect. Mira admired that about him. They walked through the village, talking about simple things at first: nature, work, the harvest, the animals Mira cared for. But soon their conversation deepened again. Evan asked her what she truly wanted in life. Not what others expected, but what she herself wished for. Mira took her time answering. She told him she wanted peace, honesty, and a partner who respected her. She wanted a life where she did not have to hide her feelings or shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. Evan listened carefully, then shared his own hopes. He talked about wanting a simple life, full of meaningful relationships, rather than noise or pressure. He spoke about wanting a partner he could trust, someone who cared about the small, important parts of life: kindness, family, sincerity. As they talked, Mira realized how naturally their dreams fit together. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt rushed. It was like two quiet rivers slowly coming together to flow in the same direction. In the weeks that followed, they spent more time together. They met during morning walks, worked side by side during village tasks, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Mira saw that he did not flatter her with empty words. He respected her, admired her strength, and valued her thoughts. And Evan saw in Mira a gentle courage, a quiet wisdom, and a heart that cared deeply for others. Soon, Mira no longer felt unsure. Her question from that emotional night no longer felt desperate. It felt like the beginning of something real. She realized she did not want to walk away from the chance life had suddenly offered her. She did not want to let fear or old beliefs hold her back anymore. One evening, as they stood near the field watching the sunset paint the sky in warm colors, Mira took a deep breath and turned to him. Her voice was steady, not trembling like before. She told him softly that she had made her choice. She wanted a future with him not because she was afraid of being alone, but because she saw kindness, honesty, and a gentle strength in him that matched her own heart. Evan smiled, a warm and grateful smile, and took her hands with care. There was no loud celebration, no dramatic moment, just two people choosing each other with quiet certainty. A few months later, they had a simple wedding attended by villagers who were surprised but genuinely happy for her. Mira wore a small smile throughout the ceremony, feeling a peace she had never known. From that day on, Myra's story became something people in the village often spoke about. Not in a teasing way, but in admiration. They saw how she grew into herself, how she found confidence, how she walked beside someone who respected her deeply. Her journey was not about being chosen at last. It was about learning she had always been worthy of love, kindness, and respect. And when she finally believed that, she found someone who had seen it in her from the very beginning.